the election cometh. On Monday, October 19th, Canadians head to the polls to elect their governing federal party and leader by way of local representatives. I've always been a news and political junkie. I love elections, I love watching debates, I love talking to people about politics. So it was with great pleasure that I put this episode together. I was very, very excited when Paul, Sid, and Daniel agreed to come on. They're all planning to vote for different parties. They're smart guys who pay attention, who post a lot on social media. So I knew I was going to get a good debate. I got a great debate. Everyone, I think, had a good time. Everyone was respectful. They all put forward very good points. I mean, you be the judge. Let me know. Hope you enjoy and vote. Whatever you do, vote. Welcome. Thanks for agreeing to come on. It's not... Most people don't even want to get into a conversation about politics, and let alone with others who may have different views, because it's all nice to chat with people that have the same views as you, but then it's a completely other thing to talk to somebody who might challenge you or have something different to say. So thank you, all three of you, for agreeing to come on. So in preparation for tonight, I put together some thoughts myself and questions in the way that I thought we'd sort of try and structure things. But, at any time, if we want to go in a different direction, it's all good. I've put out the request to people on Facebook if anybody had any questions to ask, and actually I got some pretty interesting responses. I ended up posting on the latest posts of all four parties, so I would just go on to like the Conservative Facebook page or the Green Facebook page and pick the latest post, and I'd just be like, hey, so I'm doing this podcast tomorrow and there's going to be somebody who's planning to vote for this party, this party, this party. Is there anything that you'd want to ask them? So those people there came up with some interesting questions. But I'll put those in later. But by way of introduction, so with us we have Paul, who, as he has confirmed, he's still undecided between NDP and Green. Paul's riding is Guelph, which has been Liberal since 1993. And last time around in 2011, Frank Valeriot beat Marty Burke. So Frank Valeriot, the Liberal, beat Marty Burke, the Conservative, 43 to 33%. Sid voting Conservative in Bramley-Gore-Malton, which is a riding that's been Liberal since between 1993 and 2011. In 2011, Balgosal beat Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal of the NDP by only 539 votes. So that's kind of interesting. Yep. And Daniel, who's voting Liberal in Toronto St. Paul's, a riding that's been Liberal since 1993, in which Carolyn Bennett for the Liberals won in 2011, beating Maureen Harquail, the Conservative, 41% to 32%. So, for everybody listening who's maybe not as informed or even not from Canada, because that could be happening too. And you guys again stop me if I'm saying something that's off. But so we're about to have our 41st Canadian general federal election. The 41st since
42nd.
41st or 42nd? 42nd. You're right. Good point.
Yeah.
42nd since 1867. That's this coming Monday, October 19th. The last three elections in 06, 08, and 2011 were won by the right of, I call them the right of Canadian Centre Conservative Party. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but while in power and now on the campaign trail, the Conservatives have focused on debt reduction, tax breaks, a tough stance on international terrorism. The present left-wing official opposition, the New Democratic Party, has campaigned vehemently on removing the Conservatives and their leader, Stephen Harper, from power, as well as improving healthcare, stepping up the fight on climate change, job creation, and affordable childcare. The left of Canadian Centre Liberal Party has been campaigning on changes to the present Conservative income splitting system, changes to the tax-free savings account maximum contributions limits, a more compassionate approach to refugees and their immigration quotas, as well as the legalization of marijuana. Finally, the Green Party, in addition to a platform heavily based on environmental protection, has promised eliminating income tax on income below $20,000, raising corporate taxes and working with provinces to increase taxes on alcohol and tobacco, as well as taking action on urgent Aboriginal issues. Did I say anything that seemed off, or anything that I should have mentioned as far as you guys are concerned?
No,
I think it's a good summary.
One small thing of Guelph is that the incumbent from the last election is not running this year.
Ah, okay. So
Interesting.
the Liberals have put in somebody new.
Yes, he's decided to go back to his law career.
Gotcha. Okay, so why don't we start with you, Paul? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us as much as you'd like about yourself, how you voted in 2011, and the main reason you're voting for Liberal. The main reason you're still undecided and voting either NDP or Green this time around.
Well, right now it's actually Guelph's an interesting landscape right now because typically it's been Liberal. One of those like vote together things claims that the Liberals will probably still take Guelph again. However, that being said, we've got Elizabeth May making another visit to Guelph tomorrow, so it's a pretty strong Green riding. Gord Miller is environment. He was a former environment minister for Ontario, I believe, and it's mostly I'm interested in stuff like my own privacy, like stuff like Bill C-51. I don't like it because I am very much for having my privacies. There are certain things that, yes, we may need to give extra power to police in that, but they should be requesting that power. We shouldn't just necessarily hand them the reins without them saying that they need those as tools. I also like the environment to an extent, but I believe that we do need some kind of change because we've been going in a constant cycle of liberal and conservative, and it doesn't seem like it's getting us very far or very fast in any direction. I am very much against the conservatives, and I'm not very happy with how the liberals have been voting on various privacy issues lately. So I'm kind of left with the NDP and the Green Party. And when I've checked against various stances in my own opinions, I'm apparently 98% in favor of both of those parties. So I have a hard time deciding between the two because one is better in certain regards than the other, but they kind of balance each other as far as being closely related to my own values.
Gotcha. And how did you vote in 2011?
I voted for the Greens.
Cool. Daniel?
I'm Daniel Tyree. I'm a student of economics and computer science at the University of Waterloo. This is my first federal election to vote in officially, but not the first one I've followed. My riding back home is very liberal, as well as my riding in Waterloo, and I've followed the Liberals for a long time. It's a big thing in my family. Carolyn Bennett, my MP, is actually lives across the street from me, so I know her personally.
Mm-hmm.
I support Justin Trudeau handily on a lot of the major issues that he's put down, whether his economic plan in particular, as well as his tax plan. And awesome. I've already voted last week, actually, in the advanced polling. So
was it as crazy?
I made my decision.
Yeah.
No, the advanced polling is actually amazing. What they're doing across the country in universities is really what needs to be happening. Because if we want real change and real accurate change in this country, we need all of our electorate to be active. And posting these easy, like I did it on the way to class. I could vote in the same building that one of my classes was in. It was really not an imposition at all. And I've been trying to get that word out there because you'd be really surprised how many young people don't know how simple it is to vote, even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess it was a different setup. I read a lot about how the increased number of people casting ballots in the advanced polls just meant lineups and everything, which is kind of exciting actually when you consider the apathy.
I do think that the university polling stations, however, are a different animal than the typical advanced polling stations.
How do you mean?
Well, the university polling stations, it's trying to get essentially new voters out, and most of the general public will be going to other advanced polling stations.
Of course.
So that it just wouldn't have as much volume. Like there wouldn't be as many people, right? Paul, is that what you're saying?
It would be more staggered, at least at the universities with like class times and that, whereas with the general public, it would be more around job times.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Sure.
So then everybody would show up, after 5 or something like that. Sure. Okay, cool. Well, hey, that's pretty exciting, Dan. Like, first election.
Yeah, for sure. Actual change, getting to affect actual change. I've been wanting to play my part for so long, and I've just watched Stephen Harper continue his reign for 10 years.
And now you get to not just be a spectator, but actually like turn on the TV, look at the results, and be like, yeah, I participated in that.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Cool. And Sid?
I am Sid, and I'll be voting for the third time for the Conservatives. I know that's horrible for most Canadians when you watch the media, but me and my family, we came here in 2000 from India, and we are Christians, so we sort of, we have a riding here, of course, and we will be voting for the Conservatives here, but we will be voting mostly for Harper more so than our, local riding, because it's a small riding. It's mostly liberal. You have lots of immigrants from different cultures who will always vote liberal. They will never touch the Conservatives. But we vote Conservative. I vote Conservative because I feel Harper has done a good job overall. There have been some blind spots, but it's since 9/11. It's been a little shaky. Foreign affairs, economies, and I think it's very easy to sort of pin the blame on one person or one party. But given how well we have done with the economy, we are well regarded. I mean, even the US suffered, the UK suffered, but we have been steady. I think Harper shows a lot of backbone in foreign affairs, which is my forte. I love foreign politics. I spoke to Adam about that on the last podcast, and so he's stood up to Putin. He's been working with NATO. I appreciate those things, and I also, as legal migrants, I get concerned that, if the left were to come back to power, would it mean too many refugees who are entering the country legally? I'm all for humanitarian support, but there has to be a method to the madness. And I think that a little bit of center-right that, Harper brings to the table is something we need in a world which is increasingly becoming more chaotic, more unstable, and unsure of where it's going. So that's why I'm voting for Harper again.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So the next section I've got is the questions. So first of all, huge thank you to everyone who replied on Facebook and those who have come back now to listen, because it really means a lot that people were interested enough to put something down. Sorry I couldn't get them all in. There was a more than we can sort of handle here, but I went through them. I picked a bunch that were coming from folks on Facebook. I picked a bunch that I came up with myself, and I whittled it down to 5 for each of you, so 15 total. And what I'd like to do is pose each question to one of you, and then let the others sort of put in their own 2 cents or rebut or continue the conversation as long as we want, and then we can move on to the next one. So the first one I've got is for Paul. So Paul, from what I gather on Facebook, you're quite anti-Stephen Harper. What are the biggest criticisms you have of the governing Conservative Party and its leader?
Bill C-51 seemed like it was rammed through without taking great consideration. There's been a lot of debate on it that didn't really get any revisions on it. I know that Trudeau, he was for it initially and has since said on certain campaign spots, mostly at universities and colleges, that maybe that was a bad choice. I really don't like Bill C, I believe it's 23, the one that has been dubbed like an anti-terrorism, because me, my immediate family, many people I know are now considered second-class citizens just because we hold different citizenship. We're Canadians, but we also have citizenship in other countries. So, or because of those countries that my spouse will eventually be eligible, she will fall into that as a second-class citizen in a few years. So there's things like that. We're in a recession, and those are the immediate things off the top of my head as to why I don't like Stephen Harper. I realize those are rather recent things, but
No, that's cool. And so maybe this is the only one I'll try to sort of guide, because then I just realized the next one is to Sid and to ask him to sort of rebut, just because he is planning to vote for Harper. So maybe just to Daniel, that criticism of Trudeau on C-51 is actually quite common, and I think a lot of people were sort of disappointed in the Liberal stance on that. What's your thought on that?
I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of the Liberal supporters were disappointed, but I think it's also a starting point. I think in this information age that we're moving more faster and faster into, with this connectivity that has been really high, greater than the world's ever experienced before, it's really important that we do monitor it. So it might be an imposition on us, and it was a heated topic in the Democratic debate in the United States last night. I think it's important to monitor this information, be it phone calls, be it text messages. I think it's important not to keep it, and it's important not to necessarily be connecting it to specific citizens at every point unless it's absolutely necessary. But I think it is important that we do balance our rights and our freedoms with security, because that's really what protects our rights and freedoms. As far as reasons we don't like Harper, the top two for me are really how he's changed our country to become less democratic, in my opinion. He's actively tried to tamper with the electoral system to benefit him, with the electorate not noticing. He's tried to reduce the amount of exposure that the election gets in general, so that so that people don't know to vote or how to vote. And then one of the most important things that really stands out to me is, on a slightly separate note, is how Stephen Harper does not meet with his premiers, which is absolutely unacceptable in a democratic country as large as Canada. Just comparing us to the European Union, we have provinces larger than European nations, and our country spans from ocean to ocean. The people in British Columbia want very, very different things from the people in Newfoundland and the people in Quebec. We have such a diverse landscape, and it's absolutely unacceptable to not listen to not discuss these important federal decisions with the leaders of the different provinces. And getting a leader that will communicate with all of our different political leaders is really important to me, and it's really important to the effective political process, I think.
Gotcha. So Sid, the next one's to you then. You hear the criticisms. I'm sure you've heard it before. So how do you answer these for yourself as a voter, as a conservative voter?
I think first of all, I'll answer Daniel. I think it's not that I don't agree with some of the things he's saying. I mean, these aren't cults; these are just political parties. So there will be things we don't agree with, even as supporters. And I do agree that he needs to be a little bit more in touch with all the different provinces. But I understand what he's trying to do. He understands that there is a very strong left-wing movement in this country, and they won't really listen to him. So there is only so much that he can do. Wynne won't work with him. BC won't. Sorry.
Okay, but the Ontario voters voted in Kathleen Wynne. She's our premier. He doesn't get to decide whether.
No, absolutely not. And it's not that I'm saying that
left-leaning or right-leaning. He needs to take that into account. I think that's the exact problem with this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not that I'm disagreeing with that, but I'm just trying to see what might be his, judgment call on that. Why he might be that way. I think even if he were to cure cancer, half of Canada would still hate him. So that might be the reason why, a lot of people. I mean, you open up Global Mail and you open up the Toronto Star. I mean, it's more propaganda than RT News. It's insane. I don't even go there. Yeah, and it's too one-sided. So I just wonder. But of course, these are things that have to be improved on. I agree. To answer Paul on that C-51, which is the citizenship thing, I don't think anyone with two citizenships is a secondary citizen. It's more aimed at people who use Canadian citizenship as a as a get out of jail card. You saw the Mohammed Fahmy case that's going on. And I personally know lots of people in the South Asian community, be it from India or from Pakistan, who get their Canadian citizenship, then they couldn't care less. It's just a flag of opportunity, and if they get into trouble, if they need some support from a first world country, that's when they suddenly realize they're Canadian. So I believe that if you have nothing to hide, if you are a patriot, and if you come from a country which is also not necessarily hostile in nature, it shouldn't be a problem. And I think 99.9% of the people who are secondary citizens, somewhere else as well, have no issues. I think it's mostly aimed at certain communities which have been abusing. I know lots of Indian people who have since gone on to the US to live there, and when they need medical, repair work for themselves, if you will, they come back up here, they get the free medical health care, and then they go back and live in the US. They don't even pay taxes here. So it's from that perspective. Now, as far as taking away their citizenship, that's an extreme case. I think it's only applied, you see all these people in the UK and Canada and France who leave to go join ISIS, and they commit horrible crimes. And it just makes sense, for them not to run back and take shield behind, our courts, which tend to be liberal. They're very understanding, perhaps understanding to a fault, So,
and just to clarify, I think that was more the bill was C-23, right?
C-23. Actually, yes, I made a mistake. I meant C-24.
24. Okay.
24. Yeah. I don't think anyone clear on which one is which. Yeah. But yeah, and for the other points, we are in a recession. We keep going back and forth between recession and non-recession. But again, I ask people to look around the world. I mean, you see the European Union. In Spain, 50% of people under the age of, I think it's 35, don't have jobs. And for us to be holding at 7% in the midst of an era where Japan isn't working fine, Germany is slowing down, UK is flat. It's not bad. Is it the time to try something new? I would say yes, usually, but I think right now is the time to sort of, sit down, hold the ship steady, and because we simply don't know if a change will bring necessarily something better for us.
Okay, thanks, Sid. Next one's for Paul. So, vote splitting is a real worry for anyone planning to vote against the Conservatives. Your riding has been Liberal since '93, and so does this worry you, considering that you're planning to vote either NDP or Green?
No, it doesn't. The way that Guelph has voted in the past, yes, there's been some brief scary moments as they're counting in different electoral groups within Guelph, like people who voted at one school within their neighborhood, like that particular area may be a very conservative one, whereas another group is liberal. But aside from that initial counting, I haven't been scared because there has been that brief moment in past elections where the Conservatives were in the lead briefly, and then the Liberals overtook them when all the votes were in. But I'm not that worried because Guelph has been actually, not safely declared, but it's estimated that it is quite safely a Liberal town. It has been quite historically, so I feel that my vote goes to better use to a different party than the Liberals trying to defeat the Conservatives. I feel it's better to support something that I believe in, since all our votes technically have a monetary value to them.
And so you feel safe in your riding. If it was any other riding, or if it was a different situation, you may be thinking twice.
Yes, if it was in a different riding, I may consider to vote more strategically.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have anything to input on that whole strategic voting thing?
Oh, yes, I do. Can I go ahead? Or did Paul want to say something first?
I don't like strategic voting, but it's sad that we're in a society where we sometimes feel that we need to vote for a party that we don't necessarily agree with in order to not get a party that we really don't want. I believe that we should have a different voting system, like alternative voting policy, where it's like a runoff election. But
yes,
we have the system that we have, and until there's somebody in power who's willing to change that, it's not going to change.
So I think the real problem with strategic voting is just our first past the post electoral system. It's really, really poor and, again, undemocratic. It innately discounts a lot of our population's voting patterns. And the Liberal Party has promised to change our electoral system. I actually saw Trudeau come and speak in Waterloo last year, he discussed changing the electoral system. Possibly two systems he mentioned was proportional representation as well as the preferential ballot. Both of these systems help to fully take into account the entire electorate as opposed to discounting large portions of voters in each riding. So the leadership would more accurately reflect the wants of the entire country rather than little majorities in each pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that's really important. And honestly, those are just what we've mentioned so far are some of the key reasons that I don't want to vote Conservative and that I do want to vote Liberal, because they want to make these basic changes just to how we have our elections. Moving forward, I think that's important, whether our next Prime Minister be Conservative, Green, NDP, or Liberal. Having an accurate electoral system is really at the start of all of that.
Cool.
Yeah, but I think that, I mean, I get what you guys are saying, but is it the situation of, blaming the player or the game in this situation? I think that I think changes are needed, but strategic voting is a bit, I don't know, I've never liked it, and I would dislike it if Conservative supporters were doing the same thing. I think that everyone should vote based on their convictions, not just it's not a game, I think, and it should be more about, like Paul is saying, he's more focused on why he wants to vote for the Greens, not because he wants to see Harper out, and I'm sure he does, but he's more focused on the correct approach to why we have democracy, and I think that's more important. And I showed Adam today that there are certain communities in Canada which are using strategic voting to make their specific religious agenda felt through that system. And I think that's not right, because if they succeed, the majority has to abide by that, and abide by that, the result that will come from part of that situation. And I don't know, I just don't agree with strategic voting. I get that a lot of people like to see Harper out. I'm sure after 10 years, I would love to see Trudeau out really, really badly if it comes to that. But I still think I would vote for who I would vote for based on principles, more so than voting for somebody like Mulcair, even though I don't like him, just to see Trudeau out. I still wouldn't do that. But yes, does it need to change from the first past post thing? Absolutely. I think no one likes it. Not even
the system really does encourage the gamification of the system.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately,
exactly. Yeah. I agree with that.
I'm thankful that I'm in a position where I don't have to worry so much about my last choice getting in, so I can focus on who should be my first choice.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, yeah.
Cool.
No, I think we agree. Yeah.
Daniel, do you feel that Justin Trudeau has strengthened his brand enough to repel the whole "just not ready" label?
Oh my God, the Justin of 2 months ago is not the Justin of today. The boy has come leaps and bounds in the last 2 months. It's been incredible, and I want to see what he becomes in 2 more months. Like he's cut off the ridiculous hair. He's stopped talking in such ridiculous platitudes. He's really getting into his confidence, and you can really see him getting into his swerve on the stage, and it's really nice to see. I think he's really silencing a lot of those ridiculous political attack ads.
I'm going to move on. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you were going to say something.
Just him embodying that confidence, throwing that interview with the CBC today, calling for Canadians to vote him into majority government. That's a really bold statement 5 days before the election.
Yeah, he's definitely being bolstered by the numbers over the last couple of days, isn't he?
It's pretty funny. 2 weeks ago, a month ago, he hated polls when he was polling in third, and now, as soon as he takes the lead,
Yeah.
he's all about them.
I'm just going to move on unless somebody jumps in. So this next one is actually coming, the first one from Facebook. So from Jan to Daniel, why has this election been so much about voting against someone as opposed to voting for someone? We sort of touched on this, but basically this person's saying, I don't want to hear that I should vote Liberal or NDP or whoever just to stop Stephen Harper. Do you think that there's been too much of that versus talking about what, say, the Liberals would be doing on their own?
I think in the last week or so, it's become more and more about that because that's the easiest way for the NDP and the Liberals to gain votes. It's pretty easy to throw out that we're the only way you can get away from Harper, especially at this point in the campaign where the Liberals are just starting to pull ahead in the polls and the NDP are trailing in the polls, so they seem like the really obvious choice when you put them in as their own, the Conservatives as their only opposition. It is absolutely frustrating, but watching the multiple debates that were set up between the leaders, they talked about many other issues. I didn't think it was really a problem if you were really keeping up with the campaign.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when it does seem that when it comes to a 30-second spot, all parties this time around have focused on that, and it's likely because those are the strongest feelings you can evoke.
Exactly.
Negativity will always sort of stir the most, fire in people.
And then just having Stephen Harper in power for such a long time, I think that's also built it into that kind of structure to the game.
Mm-hmm. It does seem, though, that no one can really take the higher ground this time around. I mean, they've all sort of gotten down to that level of just accusing one another and telling us, the voters, why we should not be voting for so-and-so.
Yeah,
and I would say that... Sorry, you can.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, and I would say that it's not so much been the left-wing political parties, but the media which has really made this into an anti-Harper campaign. It's not so much been Mulcair, and it's not so much especially Trudeau, whom I actually respect. I mean, as a Harper supporter, I respect Trudeau. I think that even during the debates, he would take he would not be nasty. He could be if he wanted to, but he didn't. And he took the higher ground, and I appreciate who he is much more than Mulcair. And but it's been the media. It's been the media which has sort of kicked up the frenzy over. Forget even there's an election on. It's just about, Harper, and that he must go. And I think that that's been more of a media agenda more so than Trudeau or even Mulcair making it about that. They have focused on the issues, I think.
I don't know if I agree with you. The last week or so, Mulcair's catchphrase has definitely been, I will do anything I can to have Stephen Harper not in the House after October 19th. Unequivocally said that.
Sinking, yeah.
Yeah, at least 3 times in any press release he's done, and that's probably his closing statement. So it's definitely a big part of his strategy right now.
Yeah, and it's a sinking ship. So he said that, but then there was also this thing he said 2 days ago where he said that he can't work with Trudeau at all. So, and I was surprised.
It's the other way around. He's always been open to coalescing with the Liberals and working with the Liberals to get the Conservatives out of power. It's Trudeau has been declining to work with them at every opportunity.
Okay.
And I think that's to embody this strength. He wants to come across as a strong Liberal leader that doesn't need to look to other political parties for help. It's for his image. I think it would be very different if Harper came in with a majority or a minority government in the next few weeks. I think his tone would change immediately. But as of now, he needs to be the strong Liberal leader. He needs to be the Prime Minister that we believe he can be.
Well, I find it amazing that most of these polls are being done based off of landlines, which the Canadian landscape has been moving away from that.
The entire world's landscape.
We're getting, essentially baby boomers are the ones that are being polled, and those of us who are from, I believe it's Generation X, or whatever it's called, we're not really being polled. So you've got a big dichotomy of who's being polled versus who's voting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a
Yeah,
feeling
absolutely.
that the final results are going to be quite different than what we're seeing in the polls.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
I think it will be different because the same thing happened in England in May, and I was talking to Adam about this. And as usual, the media, the polls, they all showed uh, Labour was going to win, which is the Liberal Party there. And the day when the results came through, it was overwhelmingly a Tory victory, which is Conservative. And they still can't figure out what happened. How was there so much of a difference between the polls and what the media wrote about versus what happened? So I don't think it will be that big of a surprise here in Canada, because England has a different situation going on. They have lots of problems, and they're moving towards the right because of Scotland, because of terrorism, because of refugees and all that. We aren't there yet, but I think there might be a surprise, and I think I thought that what Mulcair was hinting at is maybe he feels there might be a conservative minority, and maybe is he setting himself up for some horse trading? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think conservatives and NDP can work together, but will it be a liberal majority? I don't think so. It's the country. I think there is a silent majority which is not talking too much, but when they go to vote, it's like that Simpsons episode. Like what Sideshow Bob said. It's like you want to be liberal, but deep down you want to be rude. So it's kind of like that. So I think we're in for a surprise, but not what we think it is.
Sid, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Well, so I wanted to move on to the next question. So from Bob on Facebook, it said, do you want a government that represents corporate CEOs or one that represents you?
This is a very hard question. I hate when capitalism goes overboard, but I also hate when people think that we need to be very socialist, because that doesn't work. I've seen it. I've seen both sides in India. In the east of India, it's all socialist and communist, and it's permanently on strike. Nothing works. There is no innovation. People have no money, but they still want things for free. And in the north, which is completely capitalist, and there is amazing innovation and skyscrapers and development and money, but you have the bad things about capitalism too. So it's hard to answer. I think I support making sure that companies pay good corporate taxes, not necessarily high corporate taxes, but they pay what they owe, unlike what Amazon and Google do in the US, where they pay $1 million on $100 billion worth of profit. But we have to look after corporations. I think that if you look after corporations, they bring jobs, and they bring innovation. Innovation drives economies. And you look at what's going on in Russia and China. In Russia, in Brazil, in Australia, they have no innovation. But as soon as commodity prices fell through, there is nothing else they have going for them. So we need to support corporations. We need to make sure they're healthy, they're hiring, they're paying taxes. But we shouldn't also make it so that we hate them. They bring a lot to the table, and right now around you in your room there are hundreds of things which are from corporations, and it makes an economy, and without the economy there is nothing. So I think corporations need to be looked after. Absolutely.
The next question I had was... sorry?
I was actually looking at an interesting graph today that was oddly reminiscent about this question, comparing small businesses and individuals and corporations. And it was actually talking about investments and investing in our own country, and all these, although under Harper's regime, we've seen lower taxes for corporations, we haven't seen this money rebound back into the community. Like this money has gone into the pockets of CEOs and high-level officials. It's been removed from the economy, the money that these companies are saving from tax monies. It's dead. So
I agree.
we need to see
Those
change,
things
and
need to be
I
changed.
think we can
Yeah.
reinvest it more accurately in the middle class, which is what the Liberals' plan is all about.
I think a slight increase in the corporate tax rate back to, well, the pre-conservative levels would be appropriate, and that's really only a 1% increase.
Yeah.
But the problem with that would be, wouldn't they flee to somewhere where it's cheaper? It's already happening. I mean, you see all these companies which are closing down, they're moving off either back to the US. Michigan right now is very attractive because they're trying to build back literally their civilization right now over there. So I think we need to stay competitive. But yes, I agree with what Daniel is saying, that we should keep an eye on these companies and make sure they pay their taxes. They invest. Canadian firms tend to sit on all of their money. They don't reinvest. They don't put money into R&D as much as the US companies do. So that those things do need to change. But my worry is that companies tend to scare very, very easily, and
Yeah.
so it doesn't take them too long to suddenly run to Panama City and set up shop there instead of Toronto or Montreal. So it's already happening. You see all these companies closing down shop in Ontario. So maybe we should be careful.
Next one's from Chuck to Paul. I'd like to know how Trudeau, and this applies to Mulcair as well, can sleep at night proposing to sacrifice the Kurds to slaughter by abandoning the Canadian bombing mission. The bombing is the only thing keeping ISIS forces from using the heavy weapons they have captured from the Iraqi army.
To be honest, this is not one that I can actually easily answer because I've been looking at a bit more of an insular approach to all these candidates rather than looking externally, and I realize that's terribly selfish, but...
No, I think this is a very internal election.
No, and
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think I should have maybe prefaced
But
this
I
at
do
the
have a
beginning.
response to that question.
Cool, and I'll just say one thing. I should have prefaced this at the beginning. I don't think that any of us or any voter can possibly know, or really have a true stance on every single issue, from from the economy to foreign affairs to the cultural issues, everything. So I don't think it's horrible at all, Paul. I just I think that we are all voters interested in particular things, and so some things may fall outside of our realm of expertise. But go ahead, Dan.
So two things I wanted to say. First of all, the internalization of this whole election. I feel like this whole election has been more about what's happening inside of Canada, and not really how Canada's interacting with other countries and how we're affecting the plan on an international scale. And I think that's because Harper's been in power in so long. The Mulcairs and the Trudeaus, they don't have any experience when it comes to foreign aid, and they don't want to navigate the discussion of that. They want to talk about how they're going to change Canadian infrastructure and families and very Canadian issues. It's been very focused on our country, which isn't a bad thing. It's nice to see.
Exactly.
But then in response to the Middle East issue in Syria and foreign aid, I think foreign aid is one of the biggest jokes. Honestly, I find it's rarely successful in the long run. It doesn't set up countries well to deal with their own problems and succeed and develop properly. Trudeau's plan when it comes to the Syrian effort is a strictly non-military approach that involves sending Canadian troops into the Middle East to train the Syrian forces so they can deal with their own problems. It's a much more constructive solution of the problem. You need to give these struggling or developing nations the tools to develop, not help develop for them. You need to you teach a man to fish and he'll eat for his whole life. You catch a man a fish, he'll eat for one night.
Yeah,
Whatever
but the
happened
problem
to us,
is... Sorry.
I'll be quick. Whatever happened to us sending troops to the UN and the UN deploying our troops?
Whatever happened to the UN? Talk about on the topic of irrelevant international organizations.
Well, that's really interesting. Because
can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, Adam, complete your thing, then I'll chime in.
No, that's fine. The UN thing has been brought up though by I think the liberals specifically. It's always, I find it's often brought up as an example of the last time that the liberals agreed with the way that we sent troops in, which would have been sanctioned UN missions.
The problem with the UN is that it's run by the Security Council, and on the Security Council, of course, sits Russia and China, and
Exactly, and the U.S.
And Russia and China has, and especially Russia has a lot of interest in Syria right now. See, the thing
And all
about
three of them have veto power.
Yeah, and the problem with Syria right now is there is no man left alive to go fishing, even if you gave him a fishing rod right now. So I think I tend to, and this is where I have a lot of issues with lots of Canadians on the left, is that I don't want Canada to be just another country that sends UN peacekeepers and is one, it sits in the corner. I think I like that this country engages. It's in the G7, it's in the NATO. It was heavily involved during World War II, so it needs, I'm not saying we invade a country by ourselves, but we should be involved. And I think that Syria is an absolute disaster zone. And, you have Iran, you have Russia majorly moving in, so the allies like US, UK, France, the UAE, they need what we think of as good people from our perspective. I'm sure the Russians see it differently, to step in. And I think, overall, it's not a big, even if we send a few CF 18As to bomb, it's not that big of a contribution, but it's still important. And I think the UN only sends troops to areas where the big powers have no interest. That's when they send peacekeepers, so this is where everyone has an interest. So the UN will never really get involved. So if Trudeau is going to wait for a UN green light, it's only going to come after World War III finishes, because the US and Russia are about to go at it in Syria. So I think we need to keep engaged in Syria, just like we did in Libya. And there are bigger things at play here. And I think that this is the one place where Trudeau is absolutely going to be out of his zone when it comes to foreign affairs, because he will be representing the people on the left who are generally against military missions, but the world is changing rapidly right now. And I think, given his inexperience, he will be very surprised at how things change. We need to defend our north. Russia is becoming a big problem around the world, and I think that Harper stance in Ukraine was especially very good. I have a Ukrainian friend who messaged me the other day that I don't care who comes to power as long as he joins in killing Putin. It's things are changing rapidly, and I think when I sometimes listen to Trudeau or to Mulcair, they are speaking of a Canada in a world maybe back in the 80s or the 90s when things were very stable. The Cold War had just finished. There was prosperity. There was no war. But 20 years on, I think things have changed so drastically. They are in for a surprise if they don't think that, if they think that disengagement and UN is the way to go.
So I guess what it comes down to is, I think that the conservatives, and you said yourself, believe that the best way to go about those conflicts is to intervene militarily. Whereas I think what I've heard from the liberals and the NDP, and I think that's, Daniel, what you were saying, is that there are other ways to go about it. There are other avenues we should explore, not necessarily just continue with what we've been doing, which is agreeing to join, bilateral, whatever, trilateral, etc. missions of air assault right now over those areas.
And the thing is, we forget that we send maybe 4 fighters, 5 fighter jets. That's not much. I mean, the other countries must be sending maybe 50 or 100 aircraft. But it gives us a right to be on the bargaining table when, the war is over, when rebuilding begins. That's when we get those contracts. We get to be there, and countries which don't get involved from the start don't get to show up on that table, So it's a long-term thing. It may sound very harsh or even heartless to some people that, we get involved militarily just for contracts, but that's kind of how, the real world seems to work. And three fighter jets is not even a campaign, but it gets us there. It shows that Canada is on the world stage. We aren't just another little country like, like some other, I don't know, Latin American country or whatever, or in Asia. We are a big country, and I think we should make our presence felt.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to finish off, Dan?
No.
Okay, I'm going to skip a few of these because I think we've covered a lot of what people were asking about. Just a couple more that came in through Facebook. Sid from Ed, why would a woman or a man who supports women vote conservative? And he attached a picture which basically lists a whole bunch of things that the Harper government has killed funding for. The National Childcare Program, Canadian Childcare Federation, Canadian Research Institute for the Advancement of Women, etc., etc.
And that's a good question. And this is where, much like Paul, I would say that I'm not very versed because I tend to focus on economy and foreign policy and all that. But, I mean, Harper has been in power for 10 years and we haven't necessarily done too badly with women. I mean, yes, there have been things that he shouldn't have done probably, and things can be improved. And I think that's where a strong opposition comes in. If they come back to power, I think Harper should probably work more with the Liberals and the NDP. I kind of agree with that. I think that as for why should women vote right now for Conservative Party, I think it's not just about women's rights. I think sometimes in a national election you have to look at the overall picture for your country, and it's not as bad for. I think women in Canada are probably in one of the best countries in the world, even in spite of what Harper might have done. So it's not that bad for them. They aren't gonna they won't feel terribly done right now, and things can be improved upon, and they should vote if the economy stays strong and we are safe. And I think,
but you've confirmed that you don't. This is an area that you probably can't
exactly.
Really
I wouldn't say exactly, and that's why I think that maybe they should work with the Liberals and these people.
Just like Sid said, as he wanted Canada to be a world leader when it comes to military engagement, we have to be a world leader when it comes to human rights policies, be it men or women. If Canada as a country, as North American countries aren't being the most forward with these women's rights, I don't know which country is going to be, and moving backwards is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, I know that this somewhat ties into the whole, the child care benefit, and that it is predominantly a women's right issue, because I know a coworker of mine, and very recently in the past few years when she had her daughter, when she was getting off for maternity leave, she had the hard choice of, do we actually get child care, or do I quit my job and raise the kid because I'm earning on par with what it's costing to put a kid into child care? That was the stance that she had. As for me, I'm going to be facing that question in about a year, considering that the benefit package that he's released is effectively $13 after taxes.
Whose?
That Universal Child Care Benefit, or however the acronym is for it, but he released it, and it was a lump sum for 6 months to parents with kids to help out with child care, and it's fully taxable on next year's income.
Sorry, but which candidate are you talking about? Sorry,
Harper had put that forward.
Okay.
I know that some other candidates, like the NDP, they're trying to get $15 a day for child care. So that's what you'd have to pay in, is $15 a day for child care, which would significantly help out, well, both partners, but typically child care tends to fall on women more than men. So it is technically more of a women's right issue than an equality issue.
I don't have the most vested interest in this, especially out of the four of us. But to me, at least from an economic standpoint, the Liberals seem to have a very strong policy. I really respect how a lot of their taxing and their social benefit programs scale with income. So we're not giving unnecessary money to those who don't necessarily need it, and giving more to the people that do. and that goes for his taxing plans, his student plan, and his family plan.
Paul, back to you. I think a lot of Canadians, or most maybe, would worry about the Green Party's ability to competently govern in areas other than environmental protection. Do you have any concerns with that?
I believe that at this point, the Green Party would be great as a more of a nudging force in power. I don't see them actually being in power as a majority in Canada. I would see them more. I don't even see them as a spoiler per se, but I do see them as being able to handle things on a whole. Yes, they haven't been in power, but Elizabeth May, she's been able to hold her own, and they do actually have more than just environmental policies if you look at their platform and look deeper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just most people think that they're just geared towards the environment. There are ways to actually benefit the economy with having a focus on the environment, like trying to invest in renewables, and there's I don't know their entire plan, unfortunately, but there are other avenues.
So they've totally branded themselves around the green thing, so it's hard for people to move away from that. Throwing the name Green Party kind of associates them forever with the environment. I think one of their important role is them being at those big federal debates. Like, I really like when Elizabeth May is one of the four leaders, because she can press Harper for those like on topics such as the environment. It's important to have those options, just because maybe they're not getting votes, but when Elizabeth May put something in their platform that interests voters, then maybe that pushed more pressure on Trudeau and Mulcair and Harper to aptly change their platforms.
Well, a few little cherry-picked things that I'm just seeing quickly in their platform is stuff like protecting Canada Post. They want to keep the Daily Mail service to everyone's front door, which that affects typically the elderly, because most of us that are young, going down to the end of the street, picking up our mail is not an issue, but we have more and more elderly that are getting, well, they have mobility issues and going outside the house to go get their mail rather than going to their mailbox just outside their door. It becomes an issue. There's also, like, they want to repeal Bill C-51 to defend Canadians' charters of rights and privacy, which I know that Trudeau has said that he'd like to try and fix it now that it's in, and that he wanted to get it in order to fix it, but the NDP want to repeal it as well. There's various things in their platform that most people, they do just see it as branded as their environment.
No, those are great points, and I think Elizabeth May has come through as a very strong leader over the course of this election.
You know what it is about Elizabeth? Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to make a joke. Just she did lose a bit of respect when she got caught at that press dinner,
yes,
ranting, intoxicated. I think that may have played a factor in her not getting invited to the subsequent debates.
I think that it's very easy for her to be so knowledgeable and say things and claim things when she knows that she will never ever be in power, because Trudeau understands that. He understands that he will probably come to power. There's a big chance of that happening. So when he says that I will think about that bill, he's not saying I will throw it out of the window, because he, like Obama, understands that the real world changes quickly once you do come to power. Like Obama has said since 2008 he wants to go to Guantanamo. But each time he tries to do that, he understands that, oh my God, there are really bad people out there. And we just can't close a place where we can get information out. So he's dragging his foot on that, because he understands that, yes, the people on the left want to see it closed because it's a bad icon, but the military has serious claims as to why it should be operational. I think Trudeau understands that. Mulcair, not so much. May, absolutely not. I mean, it's very easy. I mean, if I go to a Porsche dealership right now and I say that I can ask all sorts of questions because I know I'm never going to buy one. And I can say that, wow, this sucks and that's terrible, and I would rather buy a GTR because I can't afford either. So I think it's from that. It's very. I see Trudeau sometimes when he's debating with Harper. They both hold back on making promises they know they will never keep. Whereas Mulcair, to a certain extent, and May especially, they can say things they know they won't have to face. Because once they come to power, it will be expected from them. They know they won't get to that.
However, the Green Party's platform has been costed out, right?
They do actually have it costed out. So much to most people's surprise, they actually have it costed out of like their initiatives, how much it would have changes actually from 2015-16 all the way over to 2019-20. And there's like budgetary revenues, there's personal tax changes, spending increases, there's the public debt charges. I'm just going through it at a quick glance, but they actually do have a budget plan built around the initiatives that they have out there. So it's not that it's not doable, it's just most people don't believe that they actually have put thought into it.
Gotcha.
And I do understand that there's that point of view that they're kind of a spoiler compared to the others, but I also do like that they're in a position to actually make things a little bit harder on the others and make it so that they have to somewhat second guess what they're saying, so that it's not that they're just flying off the handle, because there is going to be somebody that's going to question what they're doing.
Well, what's going to be interesting, I think, over the next decades is whether the Green Party continues to even call itself the Green Party, not just in Canada, but in other places in the world, because 50 years ago, it wasn't even conceivable that a Green Party would be taking part in a debate like that we're having now in this country, right? And I think we've seen it happen with the New Democrats in Canada. There's a lot of NDPers that are upset that that party has moved away from sort of its core principles, and it's done that, and as it's done it, it's gained more popularity, it's gained more momentum. It was the official opposition. It is the official opposition. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. The Green Party is still like Paul, like you're saying, it's sort of like, spoiler, maybe, still a fringe and stuff, but slowly gaining more attention. And will they be forced to sort of, go? It's like Daniel said, they call even their name, just sort of. It puts across the fact that they're about one thing specifically, but now, as we've been talking about, they have other ideas, they stand up for things, they have a plan for other things. So will they need to change their own ethos?
Well, we also have in like Europe, it's mostly we've been seeing the Pirate Party actually has been now making a big waves, and there's the Pirate Party International. Well, they stand for yes, they actually stand for like copying stuff and for lower copyright restrictions.
No, I was just loving your pun that they were making waves.
Yeah, that was not intended, but yes.
Arr.
So the last one, I just got one more from Facebook, and that was from Danny. And this one I'm gonna put to Daniel first, seeing as how it's his first election. What is your position regarding the enfranchisement of those aged between 16 and 18? So I guess letting people as young as 16 vote.
I've always believed that the precursor to voting should be once you pass your high school civics course. Why else do we have to take that course? I think students once they hit 16, they're in grade 10, they've taken high school civics. They're some of the most qualified voters in the country, honestly. They're some of the they've been studying politics closer than a lot of people who are allowed to vote, so I don't see why they shouldn't. Granted, they do have very different vested interests, but I think they're just as important.
I think it would be dangerous to do that because they may have the education, but do they have, education and understanding are two different things, I find. Even I find I have changed how I see politics in the last even 2 years, and I'm 31 now. So I think if a person is 16, he or she may form an opinion without understanding what that opinion is. I don't know if I make sense, but I think 18... Is that the question, Adam, you're asking? Should it remain 18?
Should we bring it down to 16? Yeah.
No, I think it should
I think
stay
16.
18. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep,
May
that's
I?
fine. Yeah.
Okay. So this next part, I'm just going to call it a free...
I actually
Sorry.
have an opinion on that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
But yeah, I actually believe that there is no actual like medical requirement that is a reason of it, unlike say donating blood, where you'd need to sign some kind of waiver like that. I believe that like if you're responsible enough to be able to drive a car, why would you not be responsible enough to vote? I thought this
Agreed.
back when I was in high school. My opinion hasn't changed on it, unfortunately, but I do believe it would actually help get people voting earlier because there is a lot of people that, because they
Yep.
are not able to do it when they're first engaged with politics and that, they just get disillusioned on
Exactly.
it. And then when it finally comes around, they're like, well, they didn't care about me then. They still don't care about me now, probably. So screw it. I'm not going to go vote because it's a waste of time. And
My sister is 16 right now in grade 10, taking grade 10 civics, and she is pissed that she can't vote.
Don't they do these... There's a whole initiative, isn't there, for people between 16 and 18? There's some sort of parallel vote that takes place. I forget what it's called. But she should probably check that out, because I know that it's possible. It's, of course, not official or anything, but... Okay,
Yeah.
very cool. Good points. So, free for all. I'm just gonna put out a statement or a question, and then whoever's got an opinion on it, just go for it. And if we don't really have anything, we'll just move on. Environment. No one but the Greens will actually take it seriously enough.
That's well, I don't know about that.
yeah,
I think
me
they'll
neither.
take the
What's
most
serious
seriously.
enough?
But I do believe that at least the left parties will have somewhat of a focus on it. I believe that the NDP will actually take care of the environment to an extent, but the Greens will take the biggest step forward in it.
I think every party will have to do something about it. As the years go by, it will become more obvious why. I mean, you will have rising temperatures. Spring is coming earlier apparently from now on. The ice caps will melt within the next 10, 15 years. So it's going to be one of those things where it won't be an option to ignore. So I don't have much concern that there will be one specific party which will ignore it more so than necessary. Yes, they might not suddenly shut down every factory and every industry to say that, whoops, we're gonna save the ice caps. That's not gonna happen because human beings are human beings. We think short term, but it will come to that. And I think if the Green Party is small right now, if things the way they are going from an environment point of view, in 40 years term, you might have Elizabeth May's hologram rule us for 20 years, so it might get to that. Yeah.
But with the muzzling of scientists and by the conservatives, aren't you concerned that they're
Scientists.
going to be ignoring the environment?
Yes, that does concern me. And this is not something I agree with. I might vote right, but I don't believe in some of the things like, problems with, especially in the US, that is problems with abortion or global warming or evolution. That's not something I touch. I don't believe that they don't believe in all that stuff. So yes, I do agree that those things need to change. And Canada is a beautiful country. Coming from India, where you literally breathe in coal all the time outside and you can't see things and your eyes burn, I appreciate over here that's not the case. So I don't want it to end up being like Asia. So yeah, I do agree that he needs to stop, muzzling the scientists and all that stuff. Absolutely.
I think environmental issues are one of the biggest that Canada is going to come up with in the next 10 years. And that's mainly because some of our biggest industries are the coal, the oil industries, energy centric. But I didn't say energy for a reason, actually, because it can still be one of our key industries. We have some of the so we have some of the greatest hydroelectric plants in the planet. We have great nuclear resources of many kinds and great nuclear plants. Energy can still be one of our big economic boons. That's not a problem at all. That's just fear-mongering hate from our pal Harper. It's important to unmuzzle the academics, which has been have been silenced in the last few years, and I think that's important for the economy and that's important for the environment. We need. This is one of the things capitalism is best for. I think we can really let the scientists and the capitalists and the entrepreneurs go with these green technologies and see how far they can get us, because I think environment and power are the two of the most important things to Canada in the upcoming decades.
Smoking a joint in Canada is a joke. You can easily get weed.
Pretty jokes.
It's pretty jokes. You can easily get weed, and if you're smart about the way you smoke it, your chances of getting into any trouble are almost zero.
Testify.
Why do we need to change things?
Decriminalization is a must, undoubtedly. The fact that we have people going filling our we're paying for people to go to jail for this is absolutely ridiculous. Decriminalization is an absolute must. We need to take the money away from these drug dealers, and eventual legalization is probably the best way to go with it. Again, I'm going to mention capitalism. I think it's important for this system, and I think cannabis is not only an incredible drug, both medically and recreationally, but I think it's also an incredible material. Thomas Jefferson said hemp would be one of the most important crops for the United people, and unfortunately, due to lumber capitalists, it's not exactly that way today. But I think the reintegration of hemp and cannabis into our society is really important for a lot of different reasons.
Well, I agree with Daniel for most of that, to be honest. I believe that it is a waste of our money to be policing, especially something that is not considered a hard drug. Now, there are other countries...
It's a Schedule 1 drug in the United States, actually. So
wow.
that means it has no medical properties, it's highly addictive, and it's highly dangerous, all of which are pitifully untrue.
Like, I understand that people shouldn't use it necessarily in case, like, you're going to operate a motor vehicle. Will this impair your judgment and reactions? Yes, you should not use it in those cases. Treat it like alcohol. But
so I think one of the most important factors to the whole legalization or decriminalization of marijuana is being able to test whether or not someone is on marijuana, because just like you were saying, activating heavy machinery, driving a car could be very dangerous on any substance, and the fact that a cop could ask you to take a breathalyzer test to prove whether or not you're drunk, but can't exactly do the same for marijuana, can be a concern.
But either way, that would be so. Legalization or decriminalization would be it would mean the introduction of a new substance into society that's policed, legal, and there available for people to use. With it would come its own problems, like we currently have with, say, alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
So to get into the whole alcohol topic is something is one of my favorites to discuss, but not really the point of this discussion we're having tonight. I think alcohol is overall a much more dangerous drug than marijuana.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I don't think there would be big problems.
Well, what I mean is
I think that's
abuse of it. So, like, again, going back to the examples of driving cars or operating heavy machinery, that's currently the law about alcohol, but still many people get behind the wheel, right? Mm-hmm.
I think that it actually happens, even though it's not something that's considered sanctioned by the, let's say, legal opinion, but it currently happens, and it's not something that it necessarily happens in small quantities. I don't think it would increase significantly. I think it would be just a little blip of an increase, if any. And
I think we're going to have...
not exactly considering that it's not so much a valid argument as that it will become like alcohol as a nuisance. It already is.
Yeah.
So
It's
I
just
agree.
really taking control of it back from the gray market and the criminals.
I agree. Yeah.
so Sid, you don't
Uh,
support the conservative stance on it.
no, I think it's a non-issue in my opinion. I mean, I don't use any of these substances, but I don't think why it has to be such an issue. I mean, I think like Daniel said, I think alcohol is a very dangerous. I mean, to compare it to marijuana, I mean, that has to be the thing that needs to be regulated more, if possible. But instead, in Ontario, we are just about to sell them in grocery stores. So that should be a bigger, in my opinion, campaign issue than this thing. I mean, I've never seen a guy on marijuana kill someone, but I've seen car crashes because of drunk driving, and so yeah, I don't see what Harper's after here. I don't get it.
I don't know. North America's addiction to ethanol is deeply rooted in cultural uh, norms and
Yeah,
would be hard to fight politically.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So neither of these issues, I stay out of it. I find Syria is a more safer topic for me in a
Uh,
way. So
But politically, I find the rhetoric curious. This week, Mulcair, although he'd been saying throughout the campaign that he was he would decriminalize, whereas Trudeau was a proponent of legalization. Mulcair's plan seems more realistic. He was I don't know if any of you watched his interview with Vice last night, but he said many times, like over and over again, I can do decriminalization overnight, but he didn't want to make any promises that he couldn't keep. So that seemed pretty respectable, and it made me wonder what Trudeau's timelines were like and what his plan was in more specifically, because it really seems like him yelling legalization might just be a grab for votes.
yeah, I think one
An
thing we all
empty
need to.
promise.
Oh, so sorry, Daniel. Go ahead. No, I was going to say that one thing I think everyone needs to understand, no matter who they
I was done.
support, politicians will say things that they won't keep once they're elected. That has to be a ground reality. I think most people need to understand and accept that. That's why on things, there are so many things which I agreed with Daniel or Paul about shortfalls in the Harper government, because it's one of those, realities of life that, yeah, they came to power and I supported them, and they kind of didn't turn out to be exactly what they said they would be. But that's political reality. You run with the best of the worst situations, kind of thing. So
Sid,
it's like
I
Obama.
agree.
I mean, yeah.
I agree, and that's
It's like
why when Daniel said that Trudeau over the last 2 weeks is very different from Trudeau 2 weeks prior, I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, they're in the final stretch. These are election promises. Rick Mercer put it best: election promises mean squat.
exactly. I mean, I sometimes get surprised we put so much faith. Like, people will be waving their placards when somebody wins. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, now they're elected. Now it's like again, Sideshow Bob, where he starts laughing and he keeps laughing once he's elected. And and Ed Brockman says that, well, he's really happy to have won. So yeah, I mean, the realities change the minute, and it's not just that they become bad people, but it's again the ground realities. Sometimes what you promise looks very different the next morning in the daylight. And situations change in the world. That's why I always say that Bill Clinton was very lucky to have been the president when he was in the 90s. The economy was growing, it was stable, terrorism was away, the USSR had just fallen apart. He was a great president, half of which was pure luck because of when he was ruling. And subsequently, even with Obama, it's the ground realities. The world is very different now. Someone may try, even a good politician, they might not be able to keep those promises. So I think ultimately, I think everyone needs to understand that, and I think Trudeau, if he's changing his tune right now, he's not doing the wrong thing. He's doing the right thing because he understands that next Monday he might be the prime minister, and suddenly he has to only say things that make sense or he can work or keep, not just, faraway campaign promises that may never get applied in the future. So it makes sense.
Have the Conservatives run an anti-Muslim campaign?
No, you know what? This is something I absolutely don't understand, and this is something that may need 5 different podcasts. But I don't think so. I think the media has been way too quick to, if you criticize any sort of and I say that as a minority person myself, but if you criticize anything minority, you're instantly given a label, and I think that's wrong. It takes away, it puts bad labels on people who just might have something legitimate to say about a certain point. I think it's not anti-Muslim. There are many Muslims I know who are against the niqab. They see no problem why you can't just remove it for just 5 minutes. I took this same citizenship oath. If they asked me to take off my shirt, I would have done it. So I wish they had, because there was no AC in there. But anyway, and I don't think I think the majority of Canada has supported Harper on this, and I don't think it's anti-Muslim at all. I think most Muslim countries have the same rules where they don't allow these things, because it's part of conservative Islam more than it is mainstream Islam, and I think I think the media has been way too quick to call anyone who doesn't agree with this ruling, calling them anti-Muslim or Islamophobia or bigoted. I think it's wrong, and I say that as a person of color. I think there is a tendency to too quickly jump to conclusions about racism and all that these days.
Given our political climate and the general instability in the Middle East, there is definitely concerns about with the kind of system that Stephen Harper has laid before us and the way he deals with his citizens. The way the rhetoric he uses is fear-mongering and worrying, terrorist breeding, according to Vice documentary on the subject. So that could be a concern, but I don't know too much about the subject.
I think that the timing of presenting it was very political, and that...
So the niqab is a separate issue. I'm just talking about general political rhetoric. That's definitely a distraction topic.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a distraction topic. No,
it is absolutely. It's a weapon of mass distraction, as Thomas Mulcair called it today.
Did he say that? Oh my God! Of course he said that. Of course,
he's pretty clever.
He is. And he's got that twinkle in his eye, like he's trying to sell you something. It's like, come on, go get that twinkle taken out.
His sign-off was healthcare, pharmacare, Medicare, Mulcair.
Wow!
Oh my God! He needs to sell something on the internet.
He's pretty cute.
With so much, made of people's hair in this election, I'm surprised he hasn't played up the whole beard thing more. I mean, they're in,
well,
right?
Well, actually, right after that, he said, "This is the first interview where someone hasn't asked me about my beard." So apparently, there has been some beard-related content during the campaign.
Oh, it's just been being cut out. Like, I want more beard content,
or just more focused on Trudeau's lovely locks.
Right.
Which he has since cut off, I think, right? He's more...
Yes, he looks much more professional, much more prime minister-like.
Yeah. He's getting ready, and he's changing, he's getting ready, and I think... the thing is... Sorry, go ahead.
I just think the way that the polling is going to really, really help him in the next few weeks. I think there's a lot of strategic voting going on in this election just because ousting Stephen Harper is such a priority. So you see them gaining this 7-point lead over the Conservatives right now in the polls. And I think that's just going to be an exponential. I think you're going to see losses for the Conservatives, and I think you're going to see losses for the NDP, and you're going to see a Liberal majority in the next week.
You think there'll be a Liberal majority?
I hope so.
I honestly prefer there to be minority governments like, most democratic countries, but I honestly don't think it will be a Liberal majority. That being said, I also hope it's not a Conservative majority.
Do you think that we could have a functioning minority at this point, though? It just seems like everything that's been said just points to
I don't think we
the
can have a
government
functional
falling pretty quickly.
I think that it would take them a little bit of time to finally put their egos aside and try and puff out their chests at first, but I think that when push comes to shove, they will try to make the best of the situation and try to accomplish some of their goals, and then they will scapegoat what they can't.
Yeah, it's very hard to call what's going to happen next week. I have no idea. I mean, I think it's going to be a liberal minority, if you ask me. But it could be a conservative minority. The more important thing will be who partners with who. That's going to be the bigger surprise than who wins. Because if it's a minority government, in 2 years' time, it will fall, even if it's conservative, and we will go back to elections again. I think this is just maybe warming up for what's coming in 2 more years.
At least we can hope for a shorter election period.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want a shorter election period.
I was gonna say I don't know. I love the stuff, right? Like I love the debates. I love everything. But
yeah, I love it too.
you'd prefer shorter, eh, Paul?
I would prefer less waste of the money.
Well, that I don't think any of us could argue with. I guess.
Yeah.
It's hard to be productive in 2 years in government.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the next one I've got is you're all very vocal on social media. With your political opinions. How do your friends react? Do you ever think twice before posting anything? And is it different? Are you different in the way you act in, say, real life?
So this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about all night. I think our current state of social media has made this election so much more interesting. You've never had this much connectivity between people during an election. Change is going to be like that every election to come. But I think being able to follow who's retweeting who and who's trending where on Google searches or on Twitter, I think that's really empowering to the people, and us being able to easily communicate our political opinion, be it through polls or be it through these Twitter and Google trends, is really empowering to the people. That the whole discussion is so important for democracy, and we really, the internet is finally a good medium for that.
How do your friends react when you do that, when you share your opinion so freely?
So my people, I bring up politics and they're like, do you actually keep up with that? Like, how do you keep up with that? Do you read articles and stuff? So many people unengaged, but so many people have been really actively looking for that political commentary since they know it's their right to vote at this age, but so many people don't know about it. So I've actually been engaged in many political discussions in the last few weeks, trying to encourage people to vote and to vote towards the left.
Yeah, and I tend to prefer more on post more about foreign affairs. I'm very interested in global geopolitics and all that, and most people don't really understand, or at least don't take the effort to understand these things, at least three-dimensionally. People tend to see things black and white, outside of Canada. It's somebody's good, somebody's bad. But I try to see things a little bit more. So I try to post historic things, also historical articles about how things came to be where they are, and that there is more to it than meets the eye. Like, for example, I often criticize extremist Islam quite a bit, very vocally, even though I have had significant, and I still do have lots of Muslim friends. I've had 2 Muslim girlfriends, but I always try to tell people that criticizing something does not make somebody, either hate it or be anti it or anything like that. You can criticize, you can, you can take the middle ground, you can explain things. Everything has to be seen three-dimensionally. It's almost like with Israel and Palestine. Most people will pick one side or the other as good or bad, but there's so much more to it than that. There's so much going on. So, and as for Canada itself, even though I am a visible minority, but because of my Christian background, we are Protestant and we tend to vote right. Because I have seen what goes on in the rest of the world and Christian persecution and how things change, how these same communities who come here and demand equality and respect have no such notions towards minorities in their own countries. So I tend to point these out, that there is more to the eye than meets the eye, and so I get a lot of support, but it's very quiet, and it tends to be mostly white Canadians who are center right. They don't speak up. They don't say anything overtly. The left people do. They will always be quick to call people like me either being racist or something like that. But that's why I said that there's a large contingent of center right Canadians who are very quiet. They're afraid of being called racist if they take a stance on some of the things that the politics have been talking about in this country. One of them being the niqab. But when it's time to vote, it changes, and I think people understand. For example, this Mohammed Fahmy case, a lot of people are very angry about what's happened. That he has blamed Canada, especially Harper, even though he flew the Egyptian flag. He renounced Canada, and but now when he needed Canada, he came. He took our support, but then he's blaming us for it. And even today on the Globe and Mail comment section, which tends to be very, very left, people were absolutely angry that Trudeau and Mulcair met him. And these are the things that I don't like about the left in this country. Is that
so? Let me just sorry, Sid. Let me just bring it back to the social media thing, though, because what I was wondering was, and I think you guys brought this up. It's great that you're creating content. People are getting more engaged in the conversation. Do you think it's do you think there should be a concern, though, that a lot of people are getting their information now from their social media feeds, for example, which are often populated by like-minded people? It's a good chance that your friends on Facebook share your political opinion, and it sort of becomes insular.
Well, there's actually the added problem that, and people have done certain tests with Facebook, but you actually tend to get more like-minded stuff in your feed based off of what you like. So if you were to like stuff that was conservative, you're going to see in your feed from the favorite stuff of more conservative, and it'll slowly wean out liberal, or vice versa, depending on how you have it set up. And unfortunately, it's not something that you actively decide. It's more inactively you decide what shows up in your feed. Mm-hmm. And Facebook has a tendency to revert back to, seeing the popular posts as opposed to the most recent posts. So you don't necessarily always see the stuff from everybody. You tend to see the stuff that it thinks you're going to like seeing. Mm-hmm. So, we arrive at the same sort of question, right? Is that a concern then?
No, I don't think so. I mean, sorry. It's not a concern that people have more exposure to social media. Because there will be people who know people from all, both spectrums. I mean, most of my friends are liberal. And this is Toronto after all. It's mostly liberal. And almost all of my friends are liberal. But it never seems to be a problem. I think...
do they engage you on when you're posting and you're voicing your more right-wing opinion?
Absolutely. Like, I have a friend, he's an Indian guy, and he loves Trudeau, and but we work the points out, because ultimately I think in this country it's not as poisoned as it is in India or in the US, where people tend to be extreme in their viewpoints. We tend to work things out like we're doing right now. There are so many points we agree upon. I think it's not as divisive politics is here as there. So I think most people on their Facebook feeds will have differing opinions. There will be lots of people who have only liberal or only conservative. But I think that's something you can't control. People have to, fire up, cbc.ca or nationalpost.ca and, get some information from their own self.
So why have Canadians, who are widely regarded as a liberal country, elected a conservative government in 3 previous elections?
I don't understand it either.
It's first past the post. The left has been split in many ridings, and unfortunately, even though people may have considered NDP or Liberal as their second choice, the Conservatives, unfortunately, because they are the rightful option for the right tend to get in.
I think most people in this country are center, and I think maybe not so much so in Toronto and Montreal, where more people are towards the left more so than center. But I think as an overall, people are centrist. I think Canadians are very, very, their opinions are very stable. They're not extreme in their views like you're seeing in the US right now, where the coasts are extremely left and the middle part is extremely right. And I think based upon who the leader is, they move slightly to the right, depending upon who it is, or slightly to the left. And I think if Harper wasn't the person leading the CPC, if it was somebody off like you tend to see in Ontario during the provincial elections, even I probably wouldn't be voting for the CPC. Maybe I would say, you know what, maybe Trudeau is a better option, because it's still kind of center. Center right and center left aren't that far from each other. And I personally support gay marriage and abortion and all these things. So it's not a huge issue for me to move into Trudeau's camp or back and forth. So I don't think it's a liberal country. I think it's a centrist country, and depending upon who the leader is, people will go. And conservatives have been lucky to have a good leader, but I think once Harper goes, I don't see who will be as good a leader. I don't see it. Maybe even I will move into the liberal camp at that point. So yeah.
Okay, guys. So let's wrap her up. Just really quickly, in one or two sentences from each of you, just a couple of points. Let's start with you, Paul. Which of the other leaders do you most respect and why, besides the two that you're thinking of voting for?
I would say Trudeau. Mostly he's trying to continue his father's...
Paul?
I'm back.
Okay, yes, something seems to have gone down, but we're back. So you were saying it's Trudeau.
Yes, it would be Trudeau, because he is the one that I respect the most. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that Harper has done, like I forget the exact name of that research facility that researched the lakes, that it costs more to shut down than to keep it up and running for another 25 years.
Okay, cool. Dan, you're next. Which of the other leaders do you most respect and why?
This is a pretty easy question. I don't have much respect for Stephen Harper, so I guess that award goes to Mulcair because he has twinkly eyes and a nice beard.
You could have said May. Though I could have. We'll argue with the twinkly eyes.
But just as an anecdote, like I remember back to grade 9 when I had one of my most inspirational teachers. I had him for all 4 years of high school. At that point, he was my geography teacher, and we watched a documentary on Pierre Elliott Trudeau and him and his two sons, and they canoed up the Nahanni River in the north of Canada. And my geography teacher paused the documentary, as he did so frequently, and he told us that one day Justin Trudeau would be the Prime Minister of Canada, and that was before he was even the leader of the Liberal Party. And now we're 5 days from the election, and he's holding 36% of the polls. So I think that's pretty amazing 5 years later, 6 years later.
Sid, besides Harper?
It would have to be Trudeau. And I've been saying it all night now, that I respect the guy. And to me, I think I would always put the country before even my political spectrum allegiance. I think if I don't see Harper as bad as the media and the left make him out to be. I think he's done 10 years. It's been tough. I mean, 2005 to now, the world has gone through a lot, and for Canada to be the most admired country in the world, it has some of the most stable banks. It has a stable economy. Unemployment is at 7%. These are huge achievements when countries like Spain and Italy and UK and Japan have fallen apart. Even the US has gone through such a poor situation. So, but if it weren't for him, if the CPC had one of those awful conservative leaders that we have had in Ontario, I wouldn't vote for them, because I would put the country first. And I think Trudeau, I think he's not mature enough to lead the country, in my opinion, but he will get there. I think even if he doesn't win this time, he is a future leader. I agree with Daniel. He has that upbringing. Political families do matter, and I think the Liberals. It won't be a huge change. I mean, if I woke up and I found the NDP had won, I'd have a heart attack if it was an NDP government. But Trudeau, I would shrug and say, you know what? If that's what the country thinks, so be it. But I will support him. But yeah, so Trudeau would have to be that person.
Gotcha. All right, last one for the three of you. Let's start with Daniel this time. Best and worst played by your leader through this election.
Best and worst played. Definitely hard to play around Bill C-51. Pretty questionable them signing onto it initially. If they wanted to, as they've stated throughout the campaign, they wanted to get that through and then repeal it, not repeal it, but modify it later. They've caused so much nervousness around security. They should have just passed a separate bill in my books. As for best played, this whole ridiculous 70-day political campaign that the conservative political scientists cooked up to try and benefit them, I think that really that the Liberals really turned that around, and I think they've been playing the last week of this election very well.
Sid?
You know what? I'm not pretty sure about this. It's a good question. I would have to think about it. There hasn't been any, again, I'm saying it's my opinion. I know everyone on the left sees everything that Harper does as evil, but I don't think there has been a bad play or a good play. I think it's been typically Harper. I think he has played it safe, and he has all he has to do is basically appeal to the voters and say, listen, 10 years, the world's been through a very bad situation. We are still here. We are still one of the most admired country in the world, actually. I have seen the difference. Even now when I go out in the morning, I get amazed by what I see around me. It's a great country. And, it's not changed drastically. I mean, some people make it sound like it's Auschwitz out there. I don't think that's the case. And it's much better than what you're seeing in the US, in the UK, in Japan. So he's played it safe. I don't think there has been a huge problem here and there. I support both the bills. Even as an immigrant, because I've seen the real world. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I still think that he should continue to lead this country, but that's for the people to decide.
A good political answer. Paul, take us out. Because you got two to do.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, this is going to be a little tough for me, but I'll give it a shot. I think the smartest play from Elizabeth May was that she wants to reduce and eliminate the tuition fees for students. I think that will play to the youth quite a bit, and also parents who have kids that are heading towards university in the near future. As for worst play, that's going to be a bit tough for me because I'm not sure there. I'm going to jump to the NDPs I'll jump to the NDPs for a moment. I think that the smart thing that they want to do is give the $15 a day child care so that it only costs you $15 a day to have your kid in child care. As for the worst, one of the bigger mistakes for them, sorry, I'm just...
Language inconsistencies.
Language inconsistencies?
Apparently, Mulcair could not keep his rhetoric in both French and English consistent.
Huh.
Yeah.
You can't say I heard about that.
Really?
Yeah.
Trudeau talked about it a lot.
He did, yeah. He made a good joke too, right?
I know. Yeah, he said his father brought in bilingualism, which means saying the same thing in English and French, unlike Mr. Mulcair. But I don't speak French well enough to know.
You know what though? Like when you think about everything we've said, I mean, with maybe the exception of the Bill C-51 thing, which kind of happened before the election. Really, during the campaign, none of the leaders of these four parties, I don't think, have really done anything or slipped up in any kind of way that's really, really hurt them. That's been interesting. I'd
agree.
I think they've all run the kind of campaign that they wanted to run.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from the fact that it's a civil country with a civil population. I mean, believe me. I mean, if you went to India right now, it's one big mafia episode of The Godfather or Sopranos. You know, there's 500 different political parties, and they're all stabbing each in the back, sometimes literally. So, you know, I think everyone who has represented their parties over here, they have all been highly educated, very respectful, and in a perfect world, any one of them should be the leader, or any of these parties, you know. So,
well, and actually, it's sort of like the conversation tonight. I think I really appreciate, like, you guys all came to the table with awesome thoughts and opinions, and it was, you know, I think we kept it a pretty civil conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're Canadians.
We should now apologize to one another.
I'm so sorry, Daniel.
Hey?
That's right. Yeah. How about them Blue Jays? But listen, thanks a lot again, guys. Looking forward to Monday. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it will be. We should enjoy it. We should also enjoy the process and thank God for what we have. And you know,
and we have to find out. We should all place bets on who Paul's going to vote for.
Do I get in on this?
Are you actually? Are you 50-50 for real?
I am actually.
Okay, so Sid says green. Dan, what do you say?
I'm saying green.
You're saying green?
He's going to go green, yeah.
He only wants to vote NDP because they're more likely to do something, but neither of them are going to do anything. So
I'm going to be the contrarian, and I'm going to say, Paul, do you still have a beard? I think you still have a beard.
I do.
Because you have a beard, you're going to go NDP. It's just going to be one of those beard things.
He's going to vote for the Star Wars party. I don't know if it's still there or not.
Yeah.
We have some weird
Jedi party
on the ballot.
Jedi party, yeah.
There's the
Rhinoceros
party and the Marxist party that split that vote.
Is that in Guelph?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there still is. At least there was for the last few elections, a Marxist and a Communist party.
For the longest time, there was the Rhinoceros party, and they wanted to make part of the country into a parking lot for some reason.
I miss the Rhinoceros party. They were a fantastic satire party.
No, absolutely go for the Marxist, Communist, Leninists. I would love to see Guelph become a hotbed of Marxist, Leninists.
I would be astounded at how that happened.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Adam.
Yeah, Adam. Thank you so much. Appreciate this.
Thank you.
I had fun.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Take care, guys. Nice talking.
Well, there it is. Hope you enjoyed. Come back soon. You never know what the next episode's going to be about. Check out FWIWpodcast.net. Go to Facebook.com/FWIWpodcast. Twitter.com/FWIWpodcast. You can listen to For What It's Worth in any way that you get your podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, whatever it is. We're there. Drop me a line if you like what you heard, if you have any suggestions, if you want to come on the show, if you need help finding a way to listen, anything and everything. Thanks a lot. Take care.
It's a scary thought when you know there's nowhere left to run.